Can I first of all say I do address the English question in my book, but I do say there's no answer. That's well, no definitive answer at this stage. But I think the problem is sometimes exaggerated. If we want symmetrical institutions from day one in a federal union, then we are going to be disappointed, because the English, frankly, need more time to consider what sort of domestic political institutions they want. And I think Jerry once said, you know, the English already have an English Parliament. It's Westminster, and I think there is a lot of truth in that. That for most of the English electorate, they do see Westminster fulfilling that role. So they don't have the deficiency that certainly existed in Scotland and existed in Wales, perhaps slightly more marginally, but has grown in terms, you know, the strength of the desire for our own political institution, grown massively since 1999. So the Mackay compromise of some form of English legislative process within Westminster does seem to me, in the first instance, sensible, because it's what the electorate, I think, want, and far we can discern it for the English. And I don't see that causing great difficulties. The one response most critics have to this is that, well, what happens if a UK government does not have a majority of English MPs? Well, it's only the Labour Party that could be in that position in practice at the minute. And, I mean, the answer is pretty obvious, I would have thought. They'll form a coalition. We're probably in an age of coalition government anyway. I know this has been recorded, so I may get into awful trouble for saying this. I think it's going to be a long time before there'll be a majority government in this country. I think we're moving decisively to multi-party politics. I mean, it's been hinted at for a generation, and more or less the electoral system has put a brake on it. But I mean, I think the electorate are showing very clearly now that they want more choice. And the thought of one of the major parties of state now getting 45% plus, I just don't see it happening. So that actually softens the whole question, in my view, the English question. And then, at some point, what will happen in a generation? Who would have thought after '79 that the Welsh would become so enthusiastic about devolution? We've talked a bit about London. What happens when the London Assembly wants legislative power? That's going to occur at some point. They've already said they want much more control on some of the wealth that's generated in London. The day that happens, I think the burghers of Birmingham and Manchester and the northeast of England are going to ask the question, do we want our own political institutions? And when the big city regions of England ask that question, and then they are joined possibly by, say, the southwest of England or by East Anglia, you have about 2/3 of England devolved, in effect. That could happen. Is it going to happen? I don't know. But, there have been so many changes, and Adam said something right at the start, which I really agree with. I don't agree with his conclusion, but we are seeing really the biggest changes in what we think states do since the Reformation. And the 19th century Hegelian state, I think the game is up. For conservatives, that has some positives, because we don't particularly like the idea that the state is absolutely driving all social change and there's our master. But that's the world, and small worlds, as one Canadian thinking has emphasised, are going to become much more significant. Will that allow the old classical 19th century states to survive? Well, I think they're going to have to change a lot, hence my my contribution here with federalism. But the English question is not as poisonous as some people make out. Incidentally, it would be solved forever if we had PR. That's a question for unionists, isn't it? Do you like the union so much we should have PR for the House of Commons? Oh, that's a nasty question. But,
I didn't expect,
perhaps a Welsh unionist should put it.
No, exactly. I didn't expect the Conservatives on the panel 2 years after the AV referendum. However,
I voted for AV. I was probably the only Tory in Cardiff, but Penarth to do so.
I think
can I then just say, I think a no vote is probable, but I think it's going to be close. I'd be amazed if the difference is as much as 10%. I think the best case scenario for for unionists is that we win the inverted commas the referendum by 10%, and then there will be another SNP government. I don't want another SNP government, but that, it seems to me at the moment, that's the most constructive outcome I can see at the minute, given the dynamics. And of course, in that gap, if we don't come forward with some form of real advance in terms of developing the constitution, the nationalists are going to really sing quite a song and go on and on about it. And why play? Why gamble on this? Why not set some of these procedures in place now, like the decision to have a constitutional convention of some form? Right.
On that, just finally, before I thank you all, taking up Hugh's point, I recognise absolutely that there is an unwillingness in London to have the question to discuss the question he posed. The sole focus, I find, in Whitehall, is on the Scottish referendum. People say exactly as you put it. We can leave the rest of the stuff till later on. And the belief that I'll have celebratory parties on the 19th or whenever we get the result in September next year, missing the point completely that this is one stage in an argument. I agree with you. Can I just make 2 points? One is, if it's a narrow no within the margin described, what impact does that have on the SNP the following May, the election? Because after all, the SNP did pretty poorly in 2010 in the Westminster election. I think that's absolutely crucial before looking ahead to 2016. If the SNP do well, that makes it much harder for Labour. Even given Richard's points about the thing, it makes it a little harder for Labour. All right, the Lib Dems will get badly squeezed, obviously, too, in Scotland, but the potential implications there. The other point is, on the English question, I would define London slightly bigger than Adam did, not just the City of London. I take his general economic point, London South East. But one name has been mentioned, which is Boris Johnson. Because Boris, I think, along with Farage, is one of the very interesting figures in this debate. You can see post-2015 him emerging as a voice of an English Tory party, very interestingly. So I think we're into a very interesting mix on that. It doesn't answer your question, Hugh, but what I find is the unwillingness to actually have that discussion on that. Can I thank, on your behalf, David for his absolutely fascinating, stimulating book, and for the contributions, as I expected, to be lively, interesting and original from Leighton and Adam. So thank you all very much indeed.